The avoidant has grown accustomed to specific dynamic throughout relationship, where you consistently pursue despite their withdrawal, where you tolerate their patterns while continuing to invest, where you express hurt about their behavior, yet remain available, hoping they will change, where you establish boundaries that you eventually soften when they provide minimal effort, suggesting improvement. This familiar dynamic has taught them that your trying is a constant, reliable feature they can depend upon. Taught them you will continue making effort to maintain connection, regardless of their inadequate reciprocation. That you will continue initiating contact when they withdraw. That you will continue suggesting plans when they demonstrate inconsistency. That you will continue expressing your needs while accepting that those needs remain largely unmet. That you will continue hoping relationship will improve while tolerating present inadequacy. Your continued trying has served their defended comfortable position, allowing them to receive relationship benefits without providing adequate reciprocation, allowing them to maintain defended distance while accessing your consistent presence, allowing them to avoid facing consequences of their patterns because your trying prevents those consequences from materializing into actual loss. Yet something fundamental shifts in you that the avoidant eventually detects. Shift from trying to resigned acceptance, shift from hoping for change to accepting they will not change, shift from continuing effort to complete cessation of effort. You stop pursuing when they withdraw instead of anxiously seeking to restore connection. You stop tolerating patterns while hoping for improvement and instead accept patterns as permanent features requiring your self-protective response. You stop expressing hurt, expecting they will modify behavior, and instead simply distance yourself from behavior that harms you. You stop trying to make relationship work through your maximum effort, and instead release relationship as unsustainable despite your previous extensive investment. The shift manifests through observable changes in your behavior, through messages you do not send, through plans you do not suggest, through emotional processing you do not share with them, through energy you redirect toward your independent life rather than investing in relationship with them. The avoidant recognizes this shift through absence of your familiar trying behaviors, recognizes through your non-pursuit when they withdraw, through your acceptance of distance rather than effort to close it, through your lack of response to their minimal breadcrumb efforts that previously generated your renewed engagement. The recognition creates specific crisis in their defended psychology because your trying has been consistent, reliable feature they unconsciously depended upon, even while consciously claiming to want less pressure and more space. Your cessation of trying eliminates safety net your effort provided, eliminates the guaranteed connection your pursuit maintained regardless of their withdrawal, eliminates the relationship security your tolerance ensured despite their inadequacy, eliminates the certainty that you would remain available regardless of how poorly they treated you. The moment they realize you are done trying represents crisis, where they face that their patterns have costs they did not anticipate, that your patience has limits they exceeded, that relationship they took for granted because of your consistent trying is ending, not through their choice, but through your choice that their patterns finally necessitated. Your absence of pursuit feels more threatening than your presence ever did. Throughout relationship, the avoidant experienced your pursuit as uncomfortable pressure activating their defended fears about engulfment and loss of autonomy. Your pursuit meant you wanted more closeness than they could comfortably provide, wanted more emotional availability than their defenses allowed accessing, wanted more commitment than their defended psychology could tolerate offering. Your texts checking on them when they withdrew felt like intrusion into defended space. Your suggestions for plans felt like demands on their time and energy. Your expressions of missing them felt like pressure to provide presence they could not sustain without experiencing defended discomfort. Your efforts to maintain connection felt like threat to defended independence they needed protecting. The pursuit activated their defensive withdrawal, activated their need to create more distance to counterbalance closeness your pursuit created, activated their deactivation to manage emotions your engagement generated, activated their defended resistance to meeting needs your pursuit articulated. Your absence of pursuit eliminates this familiar pressure that paradoxically provided structure to relationship dynamic, eliminates the push they could pull away from, eliminates the effort they could resist, eliminates the trying they could take for granted while maintaining defended comfortable distance. The absence creates unfamiliar void where your pursuit used to exist. You are not checking on them when they withdraw, leaving them in distance they created, without your familiar effort to bridge that distance. You are not suggesting plans, leaving them without structure your initiative provided. You are not expressing needs, leaving them without your articulated requirements they could resist meeting. The void feels more threatening than your pursuit ever felt, because void represents genuine loss of connection, whereas pursuit represented manageable pressure they could regulate through withdrawal. The threat particularly stems from absence of pursuit, proving you have genuinely released them, rather than strategically creating distance to trigger their pursuit. Throughout relationship, when you occasionally withdrew or created distance, they could dismiss your distance as temporary strategic reaction to their patterns, could assume you were hurt and withdrawing to make point, but would return to pursuing once hurt faded, could interpret your distance as attempt to trigger their anxiety, hoping to generate their pursuit, could wait out your withdrawal knowing from pattern that you would eventually resume trying. Your current absence feels qualitatively different because it lacks the emotional charge previous withdrawals contained. You are not angrily distant in ways that indicate you still care enough to be hurt, not sadly withdrawn in ways that suggest you are processing pain, hoping they will notice and respond, not strategically unavailable in ways designed to get their attention. You are simply absent in ways that communicate genuine release, communicate you have accepted relationship is over, have redirected energy toward your independent life, have moved forward rather than remaining stuck, hoping they will change. The threatening quality of absence also stems from it exposing their actual feelings about losing you that pursuit allowed them to suppress. When you were pursuing, they could focus defensive attention on managing pressure your pursuit created, could focus on need for space, on resistance to your needs, on discomfort with closeness you wanted. The defensive focus on managing pursuit prevented them from experiencing their actual attachment to you and their actual feelings about losing you. Your absence of pursuit eliminates the distraction that managing your effort provided, eliminates the external pressure they could react against, leaving them facing their internal experience without external focus. The internal experience includes feelings they defended against while you were pursuing, includes recognition they value you more than defended minimization suggested, includes fear about losing connection you're trying maintained, includes grief about relationship ending that they could avoid processing, while your trying suggested relationship would continue despite their patterns. The absence of pursuit particularly threatens because it demonstrates you have stopped organizing your life around them and around hoping for relationship improvement. Your pursuit communicated that relationship remained central organizing feature of your life, communicated you prioritized maintaining connection with them, invested energy in trying to make relationship work, oriented yourself toward future where relationship improved and became sustainable partnership you needed. Your absence communicates relationship is no longer central, communicates you have deprioritized connection with them, redirected energy toward independent pursuits and goals, oriented yourself toward future that does not include them or does not depend on them changing. This shift from centrality to peripherality threatens their ego and their sense of importance, threatens their unconscious assumption you needed them, contradicts their defended belief they were more important to you than you were to them, forces recognition you can build satisfying life without them, rather than remaining stuck needing them to change to make your life feel complete. Understanding that your absence feels more threatening than presence allows recognition of why avoidance anxiety activates when you stop trying. Your trying paradoxically made them comfortable, made them confident you would remain available, ensured they controlled relationship through their withdrawal. Knowing you would pursue protected them from facing consequences of patterns because your trying prevented actual loss. Your absence eliminates this comfort, creates uncertainty about whether you will return, removes their control because you are no longer pursuing distance they create, imposes consequences they avoided while your trying maintained connection despite inadequacy. The threat activates their anxiety and their desire to restore status quo, where your trying provided them defended comfortable position. Yet understanding this activation comes from their crisis about losing comfortable position, rather than from genuine recognition of your value or genuine capacity to reciprocate, adequately protects you from mistaking their anxiety-driven pursuit for authentic change or for relationship breakthrough. Their crisis temporarily generates without reflecting developed capacity to sustain different dynamic. They panic not because they love you, but because they're losing control of the dynamic. The avoidance recognition that you are done trying generates visible panic, generates increased contact attempts, expressions of concern about relationship status, communications suggesting they want to talk or reconnect, behaviors that appear like pursuit or like increased investment, contradicting their previous withdrawal and minimal effort. This panic appears significant because it contradicts their usual defended detachment, appears like they finally recognize your value, finally understand what losing you means, finally feel motivated to invest in relationship in ways they could not invest while you were trying. The apparent shift from defended withdrawal to anxious pursuit seems like breakthrough, suggesting your cessation of trying created crisis that might motivate genuine change, might demonstrate they care more deeply than defended patterns suggested, might indicate potential for different relationship dynamic. If you give them opportunity to demonstrate their panic reflects genuine recognition rather than temporary crisis response. Yet the panic stems primarily from losing control over relationship dynamic rather than from genuine recognition of your value or from developed capacity to build healthy partnership. Throughout relationship while you were trying, they maintained control through their defended position, they controlled engagement level through their withdrawal that you responded to with pursuit, they controlled emotional intimacy through their availability that you accommodated rather than requiring consistency, they controlled relationship progression through their resistance that you accepted rather than implementing consequences. Your trying enabled their control because your predictable responses to their patterns meant they could regulate relationship through their behavior, knowing you would continue investing regardless of their inadequacy. They could withdraw knowing you would pursue re-establishing their preferred distance, could deactivate knowing you would tolerate emotional unavailability, maintaining relationship despite their defended limitations, could resist commitment knowing you would continue hoping rather than leaving. Your cessation of trying eliminates their control by making your behavior unpredictable and unresponsive to their usual defended strategies. You do not pursue when they withdraw. Eliminating their ability to regulate distance through withdrawal, you do not accommodate their patterns. Eliminating their confidence, you will continue tolerating inadequacy. You do not continue hoping, eliminating their certainty. You will remain available regardless of their behavior. The loss of control creates defended crisis, because control has been central to how they manage relationship anxiety. Control allowed them to prevent intimacy from exceeding defended tolerance, allowed them to maintain autonomy they fear losing in committed partnership, allowed them to avoid vulnerable investment by ensuring they determined engagement level while you provided consistent effort regardless of their reciprocation. Without control, they face relationship developing in ways they cannot manage through defended strategies, face potential loss they cannot prevent through usual patterns, face that you, rather than them, are determining relationship outcome through your choice to stop trying. The panic about lost control manifests through their attempts to restore familiar dynamic, where your trying provided them controlled, comfortable position. Attempts to trigger your pursuit through creating perceived scarcity or through minimal breadcrumb contact testing. Whether you will resume trying if they provide slight encouragement, attempts to restore your trying through suggesting conversation or reconnection that would re-engage you in relationship work you have ceased doing, attempts to generate your hope through performing temporary interest or investment that appears like change yet serves primarily to restore dynamic, where you try while they maintain defended position, benefiting from your effort. The attempts specifically seek to restore their control, rather than representing genuine willingness to share control through reciprocal vulnerable investment. Seek to restore situation where they determine engagement while you pursue, where they regulate distance while you accommodate, where they resist commitment while you hope. The panic also reveals itself as being about their loss rather than about your experience. Reveals through their focus on how your cessation of trying affects them rather than demonstrating understanding of why you stopped trying or accountability for patterns that necessitated your self-protective withdrawal. Their communications focus on their distress about you being distant, their confusion about why you changed, their desire to restore connection that benefits them. Focus remains self-centered on their experience of your absence rather than demonstrating empathic recognition of your experience during relationship when you were trying despite their inadequacy. They express they miss you without acknowledging how their patterns harmed you. They communicate they want to talk without taking accountability for behavior that made talking feel futile. They suggest reconnection without demonstrating understanding of why connection became unsustainable, requiring your cessation of trying. Understanding that panic reflects lost control rather than genuine love protects you from interpreting their anxiety-driven pursuit as evidence they finally recognize your value or have developed capacity for healthy relationship. The panic serves their defensive needs, serves to restore control they lost when you stop trying, serves to re-establish dynamic where your effort maintains relationship despite their inadequacy, serves to prevent consequences of their patterns by re-engaging you in trying that allows them to continue patterns without facing loss. Those patterns deserve creating. The panic does not serve your needs, does not reflect their developed capacity to reciprocate your previous trying, does not demonstrate therapeutic work addressing defended patterns, does not indicate sustainable change that would make resuming trying worthwhile, rather than subjecting you to repetition, where your resumed trying allows them to resume defended patterns once they restore control, your cessation of trying temporarily disrupted. The activation you see now is what they couldn't access when you were available and needed it. The avoidant demonstrates increased energy and apparent investment responding to your cessation of trying, demonstrates through increased contact frequency, through expressed emotion about relationship status, through apparent pursuit contradicting their previous withdrawal, through communication suggesting they want to preserve or restore connection. This activation appears like the engagement and investment you needed throughout relationship, appears like they finally care enough to make effort, finally feel motivated to pursue rather than withdraw, finally recognize relationship is valuable enough to justify investment, rather than taking relationship for granted through minimal effort. The activation seems to prove that capacity existed all along, seems to demonstrate they could have provided effort and investment you needed during relationship, yet chose not to provide it while you were trying, chose to withhold engagement until crisis of losing you made providing effort feel necessary to prevent loss. Yet the activation stems from your unavailability, triggering their defended attachment system, rather than from developed capacity to sustain engagement during actual relationship. Avoidant attachment includes specific paradoxical feature where unavailability activates their attachment and pursuit, while availability deactivates their attachment, triggering withdrawal. Unavailable partner feels safe to desire. Because unavailability means desire does not risk leading to engulfment or loss of autonomy that available partner creates, unavailable partner can be pursued without fear of actually achieving intimacy that would trigger defensive resistance. Unavailability allows them to experience longing and desire. Their defenses suppress when partner is available, requiring actual intimate engagement rather than fantasy of engagement with unavailable person. Your trying throughout relationship meant you were available. Available for connection, available for intimacy, available to receive their investment if they chose to provide it. This availability triggered their deactivation, triggered their defensive withdrawal, triggered their resistance to intimacy, triggered their defended protection of autonomy against threat that your availability created. Your cessation of trying created your unavailability, created your withdrawal of availability for connection, created your distance that they cannot close through usual defended strategies, created your establishment as unavailable rather than as available waiting for them. This unavailability activates their attachment system because you now represent safe object of desire. Safe because your unavailability means pursuing you does not risk the intimacy their defenses resist. Safe because distance you created allows them to experience feelings their defenses suppressed when you were available. Safe because fantasy of reconnection with unavailable you feels less threatening than reality of sustained engagement with available you required throughout relationship. The activation specifically depends on your unavailability, depends on distance allowing them to desire connection without having to sustain connection, depends on your absence allowing them to miss you without having to tolerate your presence, depends on pursuing you being fantasy rather than requiring actual vulnerable intimate engagement, that your availability during relationship required, and that their defenses could not tolerate sustaining. The activation therefore represents crisis-driven temporary state, rather than sustainable capacity for engagement, represents their response to your unavailability activating their attachment, rather than representing developed ability to maintain engagement with available partner building actual relationship. If you responded to their activation by becoming available again, by resuming trying, by re-engaging in relationship, their activation would predictably diminish as your availability triggered their defended deactivation, would diminish as fantasy of reconnection became reality of actual relationship requiring sustained presence, would diminish as pursuing unavailable, you transformed into managing available you, whose needs and whose presence trigger their defended resistance. The pattern would repeat familiar cycle. Your availability triggers their deactivation and withdrawal. Their withdrawal triggers your pursuit, your sustained pursuit, despite their withdrawal eventually exhausts you, leading to your cessation of trying. Your unavailability triggers their activation and pursuit. Their pursuit convinces you to become available again. Restarting cycle where your availability triggers their deactivation. The activation you see now specifically could not be accessed when you were available and needed it, because your availability is precisely what prevents their activation, prevents by triggering their defended deactivation, prevents by creating intimacy, their defenses resist, prevents by requiring sustained engagement, rather than allowing fantasy of engagement with unavailable person. The activation seems to prove they could have provided what you needed, yet this interpretation misunderstands that activation depends on your unavailability, depends on conditions opposite to actual relationship, where you were available requiring their sustained engagement. They cannot provide during actual available relationship what they can provide in pursuit of unavailable you, because availability versus unavailability trigger opposite responses in their defended attachment system. Availability triggers deactivation and withdrawal, while unavailability triggers activation and pursuit. Understanding that activation depends on your unavailability protects you from believing their current apparent investment indicates they could sustain similar investment if you return to relationship. The activation is real emotional experience. They genuinely feel the desire and longing and investment they express. Yet activation is conditional on your unavailability, maintaining safe distance that allows them to experience feelings their defenses suppress when you are available requiring actual engagement. Responding to activation by becoming available again recreates conditions that trigger their deactivation, recreates your trying that they will resume taking for granted, recreates your availability that will trigger their withdrawal, recreates relationship dynamic where your maximum effort meets their minimal reciprocation. Because your availability triggers defended responses, that activation toward unavailable, you temporarily overrides, without reflecting developed capacity to sustain engagement with available partner building, actual intimate reciprocal partnership. Their defended psychology continues preventing them from maintaining, regardless of how genuine their activation toward unavailable you currently appears. They'll attempt one final performance. This is your critical moment of choice. The avoidant, recognizing you are done trying, will almost certainly attempt one final performance designed to re-engage you and restore dynamic, where your trying maintained relationship despite their patterns, will attempt contact that appears more vulnerable or more invested than their previous defended communications, will suggest meeting to talk about relationship or to discuss what went wrong, will express regret about their patterns or acknowledgement. They recognize they lost someone valuable, will communicate they have been thinking about you and missing you in ways that activate your hope. They finally understand what they lost and have developed motivation to change. The performance will feel significant because it contradicts their usual defended presentation, will include emotional expression they typically suppress, will demonstrate apparent pursuit contradicting their usual withdrawal, will communicate investment exceeding their previous minimal effort. The final performance specifically will target your remaining attachment and your hope for relationship improvement, will target through expressing exactly what you wanted to hear during relationship when you were trying, will target through apparent vulnerability, suggesting they have lowered defenses you experienced throughout relationship, will target through suggestions of potential reconciliation or renewed relationship attempt, suggesting this time could be different because they recognize what went wrong and are motivated to change. The performance is designed to activate your hope. Hope that your cessation of trying created breakthrough. Hope that losing you motivated genuine examination of patterns. Hope that crisis generated commitment to change, they could not access while you were trying, hope that perhaps relationship could work if you give one more chance to person who now appears to recognize their patterns and your value in ways they could not recognize while you were available. Yet the final performance almost always represents crisis-driven temporary activation rather than genuine sustainable change, represents their response to losing control and losing connection. Your trying maintained represents attempt to restore comfortable position where you try while they maintain defended patterns, represents effort to prevent consequences. Their patterns deserve experiencing through re-engaging you in relationship that will resume familiar, unsustainable dynamic once performance achieves its purpose of restoring your trying. The performance is not evidence of therapeutic work addressing defended patterns, is not accompanied by evidence of sustained therapy, is not demonstrated through behavioral changes maintained across time, is not supported by developed insight about defensive structure or by genuine accountability for harm patterns created. The critical moment of choice arrives when you must decide whether to respond to final performance or whether to maintain boundaries protecting you from resuming trying that will recreate harmful dynamic. Responding to performance means accepting their crisis-driven expressions as sufficient evidence to justify giving another chance, means softening boundaries you established, means resuming trying you ceased, means returning to relationship based on hope. Their performance reflects genuine change, rather than requiring evidence of actual sustained therapeutic work and behavioral transformation. Responding recreates familiar pattern, where their minimal effort generates your maximum investment, recreates cycle where performance convinces you to try again. Your trying allows them to resume defended patterns. Patterns again become intolerable, requiring your eventual cessation of trying. Your unavailability again triggers their performance, creating repetitive harmful cycle. Maintaining boundaries means refusing to respond to performance regardless of how compelling their expressions appear, means treating performance as crisis-driven activation that will fade once you become available again, means requiring evidence of genuine change through sustained therapy and behavioral transformation before considering reconciliation, means protecting yourself from repetition by refusing to accept words during crisis as substitute for demonstrated capacity sustained across time. Maintaining boundaries honors the difficult work you did to cease trying, honors your recognition that trying was harming you, honors your establishment of self-protection through releasing relationship, honors your hard-won understanding that their patterns make relationship unsustainable regardless of how much you try or how much they perform during crisis about losing you. The choice particularly tests your resolve because performance activates hope, and because hope feels preferable to accepting relationship is permanently over. Hope feels like possibility, whereas acceptance feels like loss. Hope suggests relationship could still work, whereas acceptance requires facing relationship failed. Despite your extensive trying, hope allows fantasy that perhaps they changed, whereas acceptance requires recognizing they demonstrate no evidence of change beyond crisis-driven performance. Yet hope based on performance without evidence of genuine change is dangerous hope, is hope that leads you back into harmful dynamic. Is hope that sacrifices your well-being for fantasy that statistics and psychology suggest will not materialize into actual sustained transformation? Is hope that prevents you from moving forward toward future that does not include person whose patterns proved through sustained demonstration they cannot provide healthy partnership you deserve? Understanding that final performance represents critical choice moment protects you by preparing you for their likely attempt to restore dynamic, where you're trying maintained relationship despite their inadequacy. The preparation allows you to recognize performance as manipulation, conscious or unconscious, designed to restore their comfortable position rather than representing genuine breakthrough or genuine developed capacity. The recognition protects you from making choice based on activated hope rather than based on evidence and based on patterns they demonstrated across relationship duration, proving their defended incapacity regardless of crisis-driven performances that temporarily suggest change without reflecting actual therapeutic work restructuring defensive patterns that continue preventing them from sustaining intimate reciprocal partnership. The protection requires you to choose maintained boundaries over responded performance, requires choosing evidence over hope, choosing demonstrated patterns over expressed intentions, choosing your well-being over fantasy. They will finally provide what trying never generated them providing.